Pixel Sift. Hello and welcome to episode 165 of Pixel Sift. My name is Gianni. I am your host for this episode. Today we are talking about the past, we're talking about the future, we're talking about the present because ACMI, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, have just put together a brand new revitalisation project. The whole place has been rebuilt, revamped, ready to go. And as part of that, there's a new permanent exhibition. It's called The Story of the Moving Image, which includes a permanent collection of video games from Australia and around the world. If you've listened to Pixel Sift, you know that's the sort of thing that we like to hear about. And our guest on this episode is Arieh Offman, who is the programmer and video game curator at ACMI. We talked about what it takes to collect, to preserve, to display and present video games in the context of Australian media for audiences and for participants to check out much further into the future. But now it's part of a free exhibit supported by Melbourne game development studio Big Ant Studios, who've come on board to help support this project. I spoke to Arieh just a short time ago about the making of this exhibit.
Hey there, if you're enjoying the show and you want to hear more, subscribe to Pixel Sift on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, or listen on pixelsift.com.au. See you there.
So, Arieh, can you tell me what is the Games Lab and the new exhibit that's going to be available for everyone to check out at ACMI?
Yeah, fantastic. Look, it's something that we at ACMI are very, very excited about. So obviously we've gone through a renewal process. We've been closed for over 2 years now, and it's thanks to a $40 million investment from the government, which is great. And it's given us a chance to really rethink what ACMI is and how we can represent it to the public. So previously we had a much loved exhibition, Screen Worlds, which was highly visited. We have over 1.5 million visitors per year, and almost 800,000 of them used to go through Screen Worlds. But one of the things that we reconsidered while curating and thinking about this new exhibition, which is called The Story of the Moving Image, is about the story that we want to tell. The moving image is so vast, and the moving image is so vast that it really is a highly curated journey through. And so the Games Lab is an opportunity for us to explore video games as a medium and how they can move us, how they can tell stories. And I suppose my initial thinking when I was curating the Games Lab was I wanted everyone who goes through there to be able to maybe just take the next step on their video games journey, whether that's someone who's never played a game at all and might see something there that actually excites them a little bit or encourages them to pick up a controller or keyboard and mouse and play, right through to people who, like probably I'm guessing myself and you, who have been playing games since we were yay high and form a big part of our lives.
What parallels have you seen when you've been curating this exhibit in the Games Lab and across comparing it to other bits and pieces? Like, what are some of the common themes that you've seen and some of the things that you think that games do completely differently that wouldn't be seen in any other medium?
Yeah, great question. So in choosing the games for the playable stations, of which, again, we have 12 and they're separated into six banks, two banks of six, video games is the only section within the exhibition that is dedicated to a single medium. So every other section, Explorer, has all different kinds of mediums, film, television, digital and internet culture, and video games, and art strewn right throughout it. So what I wanted to do with the games and in these sections was I wanted to respond to and explore the themes within two particular sections for this initial iteration. It's also good to note that we're going to be refreshing the content. So the timelines of it are yet to be completely determined, but we would expect at least once every year to year and a bit, we're going to completely refresh all of the games that are in there and the content associated with them. So the first games that you'll encounter in there, we wanted to really look at the moving world section and the craft of video games. And I mean, there are so many things that we could pick to be in there. So I wanted to pick a singular idea that we could put across to the audiences, and that's the idea of environmental storytelling, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, but for watchers, it's about crafting a living world, and about all of the narratives and the stories that you tell through the way that the world is crafted. So the example that I always tend to use is, let's say we're playing a game. I don't know, maybe it's a Bethesda style, adventure game, or whatever it might be. And you are going down into a house, and then there's next part of the quest is to talk to someone in a basement. And you could just go down there and talk to them and move on to the next part of the quest, or you could look around, and in the corner of the basement you see a teddy bear. And what that starts to bring up is all of the questions about why that teddy bear is sitting there, what has happened to that person, and it's all of these stories that I think video games are so rich as a medium, because they allow us to explore in a non-linear way, unlike any other medium. So several of the games that we've got in there, we have games from Australia, but also from right from around the world. I could say that I have a bit more of a focus on exploring indie games within the Games Lab, but particularly because I would like to help to expose. I'd like to expose and show visitors a range of games that they may not have come across before, but also because personally I think indie games are so wonderful and have such an ability to be experimental, to deal with themes and to try things out that, being honest, a game with $150 million budget probably can't. So some of the games that we've got in there are Gone Home by Fulbright, which I found a really moving experience, and it kind of kicked off that whole trend of walking simulators. And also the reason I really love that is that it uses tropes from across the moving image. So it uses that whole horror genre trope and then kind of flips it on its head with a really beautiful, positive ending. And again, the fact that it has such great representation of LGBTQIA themes is fantastic. So that's one of the ones we've got in there. Another game that we've got in there is The Gardens Between, so made by the Voxel Agents here in Melbourne. And we're really proud of this game because it actually came about through a long history with ACMI. It actually was initially conceived in a game jam that we held probably around 10, 11 years ago or so. And then we've held multiple open beta testing sessions with them over the years to change and to iterate this game. And then obviously got to feature it now since its release in 2018. And I think it's a really, again, a beautiful example of environmental storytelling, because it tells the story of the kind of friendships that you have when you're 10 years old, that you never really have like that. And there might not be friends that still last with you for your whole life, but they stay in your memory and affect who you are.
I was going to say, talking about that sort of experience of playing those games in the thing, and you've curated a selection there. I know that ACMI has had a long history with sort of promoting and developing games as well, or at least sort of being a facilitating force within that. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your experience with doing things like the Audience Lab and building up that sort of experience, and other events, but you mentioned a game jam there as well, to sort of see it move its way through the different stages, then eventually be something that can be on your rotating display for people to check out.
Yeah, great. So the Audience Lab, so the ACMI and RMIT Audience Lab, it's a project and a program that I'm very proud of. So it's now in its third year. So we piloted it back in 2018, and literally just kicked off the first live one about 2 weeks ago, and we featured a really fantastic Melbourne game. So from True Crime Mysteries, I'm not sure if you know that one, but they had that really awesome location-based game, episode in the Lonsdale Street. And so their next episode is about a murder at the Eastern Market. And so they did an open beta test of that a couple of weeks ago. And so we're really proud to, I suppose, in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from now, on the 20th and 21st of March, we've got our next Leeds Lab, and people can actually pop along and see the game Enchanted by Dragon Bear Studios, who are also sponsored residents here at ACMI X. Again, a really fantastic game, and a really inspiring group of developers, particularly because they use their funding in order to bring on First Nations artists, whether that's musicians, whether it's modelers, and also to integrate diverse and First Nations characters into their game. So yes, you'll be able to come along and play Enchanted at the next audience lab, it's a really great, fun 4-player couch co-op style tavern game. So kind of think, Overcooked, but with a little less frantic.
Now, I want to get a bit of a feeling about why games are so important to you as a medium. What is it about them that you really like and you want other people to connect to? And for people who maybe are trying to convince maybe family and friends, maybe partners who are not into it, what you think is the most compelling reason for someone to check out games? They could probably be part of the same thing, I'd imagine. So,
yeah, wow, like the most compelling reason. I mean, I suppose. Look, I love games, and they've always been an integral part of my life. And for me, I suppose, the thing that I would try and show people, and I'm amazed that in 2021 we actually still have to have this debate and argument, but the fact that games can tell amazingly affecting and emotional stories. They are a medium for delivering a narrative in a way that no other medium is. And so when I look back through some of my favorite games that I've ever played, they often are single player narrative games that have allowed that push my boundaries, that explore my moral and ethical choices. We've been talking about indie games quite a bit, but last year, The Last of Us 2, The Last of Us 1, I just found was it's such a brilliant use of the medium, particularly, and it's so clever in the way that it's that it got you to question your own choices and also your own responses to things, particularly with Ellie's journey in the first half of the game, and then flipping it on its head, and then going through Abby's journey in the second half. And given that the gameplay is so much about this brutal violence, and it encourages you to think about how you react to the situations, because in the first half of the game, obviously, it's been out for a while now, so it's not going to be a spoiler to say, look, after Joel's killed, you are encouraged into this revenge, and then for it to flip it on its head like that, and then it's just such smart writing and so affecting as a player, and really drives to the core of what the game is about, which is the nature of violence, the cyclical nature of revenge, and the fact that no one wins.
Last of Us 2 is obviously like a capital G video game, and that's probably not going to be the most accessible thing for people who are just starting their journey in. So is it your hope that people will sort of build up their experiences through something like maybe playing something on their phone, coming into to play and check out the exhibit at ACMI? And with that, can you tell me, with that sort of guided process through, tell me about some of the other games that are sort of featured within the exhibit, so that you can kind of get the breadth of what is there, and things that maybe made the cut for one compelling reason that you thought this is the reason it has to be included in the first run.
Yeah, definitely. So, we've talked a bit about the first six games, or at least the curatorial intent behind that. The other six are tied to the Moving Minds section. So, what I really wanted to do with those games is look at games that explored critical themes that we are facing today. So that could be anything from ecology and climate change through to factual media and fake news, through to surveillance culture and all this. And so some of the games that are featured in there that really excite me. So we've got a exhibition build of Orwell Keeping an Eye on You, which is a really brilliant game, and a really clever use of the medium that couldn't be done in any other medium. So, I mean, for those who haven't played it, it's you play the role of a worker at this secretive government or non-government organisation called Orwell that basically watches over people and decides as to whether they're going to be prosecuted criminal and judged as criminals or not. And so in this first episode, there's a bombing that happens at the start, and you're given this particular person to look at. And so you trawl through their social media posts, through their blogs, and then choose pieces of evidence to make your own decision about the guilt of this person or not. And I mean, I think that speaks really highly to the world that we live in today, where all of our social media and our lives online are reflected. So another game that we've got in there is a great one called Headliner Novi News, and it's a really fun one because I actually did a special build for ACMI. So there's some really Easter eggs and some fun ACMI references throughout the game. But in that, you play the editor of an online paper, which is called a headliner, and in it you'll be presented with news stories and often quite binary options as to how you want to publish it, as to whether you support this, whether you're against this, etc. And then through the publishing of these stories, you see the effects that happen in the world around you. And are reflected within society. So again, a clever, interactive way to deal with quite a serious issue. But that said, there are again, I would like anyone to be able to come into the lab and play a game and take that next step. So we have beautiful experiences like Flower by Bajanova Clark and that game company. Which is kind of the precursor to Journey, and you play a pedal floating on the wind and turning the world beautiful around you. We've also got I could rant about all of it. We've got Akami, the remastered version of Akami, which is again just such a clever game. So particularly through the use of painting as a mechanic within the game. And also the art style, which comes from and which echoes the kind of ukiyo-e and sumie wood carvings from ancient Japan, and it's every moment in that game is screenshotable and is picturesque, like a work of art by itself. And of course, we have our arcades in there, which are free to play and are definitely one of the biggest attractors. People love being able to go in there. And also, I love the fact that I can sit there and play the game and not have to drop, $2 or $1 in every time in order. So what have we? We've got an original Dragon's Lair cabinet in there. And why did I pick Dragon's Lair? I mean, you could argue that it's one of the greatest, or one of the worst video games of all time. I have a nostalgic thing. I think a lot of us do with seeing that cabinet in there and seeing it looked like no other game did at the time with that beautiful Don Bluth animation, and also so frustratingly hard because it's built just to eat your coins up. And it was the origin of the QuickTime event. So many reasons to be in there. We've got original Simpsons Cabinet. So one of the great Konami 4-player beat 'em ups of that era. Again, very nostalgic for many people, but also it's quite interesting because it was created after only just a single season of The Simpsons had been done, and we see some really interesting representations of characters that are definitely don't fit how the series has evolved, but also had recorded speech and was one of the first arcade games to actually feature recorded speech. I also find it interesting because they use that very same code and build and reskinned it multiple times for other popular games. So most notably, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game is basically the Simpsons game just reskinned. And I remember loving Turtles so much. So we've got Ms. Pac-Man in there as well, and I think Ms. Pac-Man has really interesting story behind it. So I mean, obviously, it was created initially as a mod. Called Crazy Otto by three MIT dropouts, and they did it because they got bored of playing Pac-Man. That like they'd beaten it to its highest level 1,000 times, and wanted to increase its difficulty. So they modded it, and some of the significant changes were the randomization of the way that the ghosts actually follow you, and the additional maps and all of that, and the fact that with this mod going out and being sold, they were actually hired by Atari Namco to go and continue to create games. We also I like to think of Ms. Pac-Man as like the original feminist icon, because she's actually the first female protagonist in a video game, which is pretty significant. I also find it's a really interesting story about like the whole creation of Pac-Man in general was a game to appeal to girls. It's while I was sitting down in a pizza joint, and wondering what would girls like, what are girls into? Of course, girls are into eating, so we've got to make a game about eating. And of course, they took a slice of pizza out, and they're like, "Whoa!" And there's your Pac-Man created. So I think that's a really fun story behind it.
Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, some of the preservation efforts there? Because you're talking about some games that people maybe have never had a chance to play, that were born after they were even in the arcades. Arcades are not hugely around anymore in the way that they used to be. What do you need to do to preserve these games, make sure that they're playable, and get them up to a condition so that they are, exhibitable as well? Because that's obviously a different consideration, just being able to play the game, so that people can check it out hundreds of times.
That is a huge question, and I mean we could do an entire 2-hour episode on that one alone. I think one of the things people don't realize is that games and current digital media are actually the most difficult to preserve, particularly because technology moves so quickly, and there are so many iterations and also interconnecting factors such as drivers and software and their variations, etc. That even stuff that was made 10 years ago, or not even 10 years ago, stuff that was made in the mid 2010s, like a phone game. How do you collect and preserve that? So we're really proud that we actually have an ARC, so an Australian Research Council project. We did one quite a few years ago now, called Play It Again, which was looking at the history of Australian-made games throughout the 80s, so particularly Melbourne House and Beam Software and those kind of things, and preserving those for future generations to be able to play. And you can see a bit about that on the Play It Again website. But we're really excited that we're actually right at the beginning stages now of the next stage of that ARC process, which is called Play It Again 2. And this is through the 90s, through the 90s era of Australian games. So we actually have a really fantastic part of ACMI, which is part of our collections team, called the Media Preservation Lab. And so we work in combination with RMIT University and Swinburne University, and also with other organisations around Australia, such as the NFSA, in order to collect and preserve games. And so currently we're in the process of working with several Melbourne companies to begin collecting and preserving all parts of games right now, including so some of the ones that we're currently in the works with are Florence by Mountains, which is again really beautiful Melbourne game. Beautiful. And of course, Untitled Goose Game, which just went huge around the world, and it's just such a great success story for House and those 4 really talented gentlemen. And I'm sure, the great part about Untitled Goose Game is that I know that it's sold enough that now they're going to be able to continue to develop these amazing, quirky games and be supported for the rest of their lives off what they've made for this one game. So we're very committed to collecting and to preserving Australia's games for future generations to be able to play.
With that, obviously, when you talk to House now, you can pop on down to their office and say, "Hey, let's think about making an archival version of this game, something that we could hold and play forever." But what do you do if you've got an older game? Some stuff like the '90s era games you're talking about, or even earlier than that. Trying to get them back up and running. Is it a sort of Frankenstein-y sort of process to put it back together to make it live?
We're very much in support of emulation and emulation as a service, and that's the process that we're trying to work through now. So at last year's online PAX, we actually did a panel dedicated directly to how we're actually using emulation, and with a few games that are part of the collection. So we looked at, for example, the 1992, I think it was, NES Aussie Rules game, which is hilarious, given that they couldn't actually use any of the team names or any of the things. So I like it, but. And so we showed examples of how we're using different emulators to try and to preserve that. So ideally, where we'd love to be able to get to is to run emulation as a service, so that museums, galleries, places around the world can show and exhibit these games directly through an online portal, and have it all put together in the back end.
I used to work for a screen agency, and part of our funding arrangement was that for archival purposes and for record purposes, we used to be able to say, "Hey, look, you need to provide us with something like that." Does that exist for funding in Victoria or even around the country? That other options you might be pulling in, or is that something you'd like to see come into place for games that are funded with public funds?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Currently, as far as I'm aware, it's not part of the funding arrangements that the games need to be collected and preserved, because it's still a very, very difficult thing, because I don't think there is recognition or understanding widely enough about the amount of effort that needs to go in order to try and preserve these artworks. And so we're still having symposia and forums about why we need to do this at all, which to me is actually quite crazy, because we're also at a time where things are very, very at risk. So storage media, optical media has a lifespan. So the discs and CDs, they have a limited lifespan and will die. Digital tape, is a little bit better. So it's a little bit longer lasting, but it's still very at risk. Even hard drives and things like that, they all have a limited lifespan. So the more we need more people to come on board. We need more awareness and honestly more funding to be able to go to it, because we ourselves and other organisations like us that do the collection and preservation of games and other media have limited resources, which means we may need to make choices about what we can do and what we can't due to capacity reasons.
And I also want to ask you about this, because you're the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. What is the Australian voice or the Australian story that you have been able to pull out or seen represented in the games that have been selected, or potentially games that might be shown in future?
Yeah, great question. So, firstly, I think one of the key drivers at ACMI is that we want to centralise First Nations stories and creators right throughout our exhibition. And so there is not just a small First Nation section, it is weaved right throughout the exhibition. And so going forward, I would like to continue to curate more and more games, like for example, Enchanted, that are made and that tell First Nations stories. I can say a little bit of sneak preview, but the next iteration of the Games Lab will be entirely focused on Australian games. So that will be sometime 2022. We'll be looking at that changeover. I think I'm very, very passionate about Melbourne-made games as well. I think we have a really, really brilliant and unique development scene here in Melbourne, with places such as the Arcade, where that house is, so many great development companies, and again, our own resident co-working space here at ACMI X. But also like a whole lot of independent developers, and it's just a really, really exciting and vibrant scene. And I think that particularly Melbourne, but also around Australia in general, we're doing things a little bit differently to the rest of the world. And I love to see that Australian voice come out. And we say, what is the Australian voice? Well, I mean, it is we are so diverse and we're so multicultural that there are so many different stories and that can be told. But some of the things that really excite me are some of the games used as art, games that are enjoyable playing experiences. Like, so, I mean, there's a whole new generation of game developers that are coming up, just making really exciting things like Grace Brooksner and the Frog Detective series, or I really love Cecile Richard and then the kind of art games that she makes that really explore, that explore like mental health and trauma and a whole range of things that are often aren't talked about. And so I'm really excited to have an opportunity to be able to give these the creators and these games a platform, and for audiences to be able to see them.
Ari, it sounds like an amazing amount of fun, and definitely something to come back to and check out if you're a visitor to Melbourne or you live locally. There's opportunities to come back and have a look at it many times. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and telling us about the new exhibit. And I'm like a lot of other people, I can't wait to come and check it out.
It's been my pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you at ACMI.
That's Arieh Offman, the curator of video games and programmer at ACMI in Melbourne, part of the talking about the story of the moving image, a new exhibit, a permanent exhibit that's free for people to check out, featuring a number of video games from Australia and around the world. That is supported by the Melbourne game development studio Big Ant. If you want to check it out, ACMI is open right now for you to have a look at. Whether you're there in person in Melbourne or you're going for a visit, go and have a look at that one there. Pixel Sift is produced by Mitchell Lowe, Fiona Bartholomaeus, Scott Quigg, Sarah Ireland, Daniel Ang, Adam Christou, and I'm the executive producer, Gianni D. Giovanni. If you like what you've heard, well, we talk to Australian game developers every week. We talk to international developers as well. We find out what it takes to make these amazing pieces of media that we love. You can find out more of that by heading to your podcast player of choice. You can subscribe to us wherever you'd like to listen to podcasts, or you can find us on our website as well, which is pixelsift.com.au. While you're there, while you're on the internet, why don't come and join the Pixel Sift community? We have a Discord server where people can discuss the things they're working on. They promote some of the stuff that they're building at the time. You can find developers and previous guests of the show in there. If you've got a question, you can ask them there. We also, people share cool links and great stuff. It's a great supportive community. We'd love to have you a part of it. You can join that by going to pixelsift.com.au/Discord. So pixelsift.com.au/Discord. While you're there online, if you give us a rating and a review, people always ask for that, but it does make a difference. And also tell your friends. If you think someone you know would like what we do at Pixel Sift, we'd appreciate your help sharing the word. Get them subscribed, set them up, hit the YouTube subscribe button, hit the little bell, you know the drill. If you think someone would like it, nothing better for you to do to support the show than tell your friends or family that they would enjoy what we do. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, have fun.